Chapter 995. Yes, the Shanqing Saint. The Qingping Sword Spirit smiled and said, I didn't expect to meet the Shanqing Saint at that time. Xing Hui looked at the Qingping Sword Spirit. If he did not guess wrongly, the Qingping Sword should be the sword of the Shanqing Saint? Why was he separated from the Shanqing Saint? Due to the battle at the Boundary Tablet Pass, the Shanqing Saint lost all his disciples. However, the Dao Ancestor was unfair and disheartened. After being punished by the Dao Ancestor and sealed in the sky beyond heaven, he simply left the primordial world. When he was wandering in the primordial world, he left the primordial world by chance and entered the chaos void. He lost his way back in the chaos void. If we did not meet by chance later, the Shanqing Saint would have needed many years to return to the primordial world. Naturally, there would not be a series of arrangements. Do you have any arrangements regarding the creation jade? The Qingping Sword Spirit nodded. In fact, when the Shanqing Saint returned to the primordial world and intervened in the battlefield, the defeat of our immortal Dao civilization was already irreversible. The saints had fallen. Even the great Dao ancestor Hongjun could not reverse the situation. The saints have fallen. Xing Hui frowned. Have they really fallen? Didn't they say that the saints and the immortal Dao world coexist? As long as we can reignite the flames of the immortal Dao civilization, the saints will be able to return from death one day and be reborn. That's true, but the key to how to walk out of death and be reborn lies in the river of time of our immortal Dao civilization. The true meaning of the saints' immortality also comes from the river of time. The river of time is the best and greatest gift that the great eternal plate left for us descendants. The river of time? That's right. The great Dao ancestor controls the eternal power to awaken the fallen saints from the river of time. This is also the reason why even if the saints are not sleeping but have truly fallen, as long as the fire seed of the immortal Dao civilization is not extinguished, the saints of the immortal Dao civilization will return from death one day. Xing Hui was enlightened when he heard that. At this moment, he already understood the greatness of ultimate eternity. As the river of time left behind by the eternal plate, it was not surprising that it had such an ability. Wait, you're saying the Dao ancestor can awaken the fallen saints from the river of time? In other words, the saints are completely immortal and indestructible. If they die, they can just return from the river of time. Then why were they defeated? The Qingping Sword Spirit glanced at Xing Hui. Shouldn't you understand this point? I understand. The price of manifesting the river of time. The price, Xing Hui immediately understood. Manifesting the river of time required a saint to burn himself. How difficult is it to become a saint? If the immortal Dao civilization was still complete, it would only take a few tens of thousands of years for a fallen saint to regain his sainthood. But without the support of the immortal Dao civilization, it would be extremely difficult for a fallen saint to regain his sainthood. The Qingping Sword Spirit said, tens of thousands of years. Xing Hui understood. Under normal circumstances, tens of thousands of years was nothing to the great saints. Perhaps they could rest for hundreds of millions of years. However, during the Great War, countless top experts died at every moment. Even if the time axis of creation and chaos life forms was extremely long, tens of thousands of years was still enough for many things to happen. In other words, the speed of the enemy's attack surpassed the speed at which they could revive and recover. Under such circumstances, even with the river of time, the immortal Dao civilization would still be defeated in the end. In addition, to activate the river of time and revive someone from it, there's another prerequisite. It requires the power of the creation jade. The creation jade? The Qingping Sword Spirit nodded. That's right. Compared to the long river of time, the immortal jade of fate is equal to a key that could bring people out of the long river of time. The one who holds this key is qualified to open the long river of time. Only then could he really revive people out of the long river of time. But later, the creation jade shattered. Yes, the Qingping Sword Spirit said, due to various reasons, the creation jade itself was damaged. Even though it was repaired by Tao ancestor Hunyuan, it was not nourished by the power of the immortal Tao civilization, leaving behind hidden dangers. Like broken porcelain, no matter how well it was glued, the cracks could not be truly removed forever. Usually, these cracks did not seem to affect the immortal Tao civilization, but when the creation jade was frequently used, it finally became unable to bear the burden. Moreover, at that time, the Master of Chaos appeared out of nowhere and blocked all of our attacks. The Master of Gods and Master of Time led many creation and chaos life forms to attack with full force, tearing apart our immortal Tao civilization. Thus, the creation jade that was equivalent to our immortal Tao civilization's imperial jade seal shattered. It had cracked, the prelude to the immortal Tao civilization's defeat. Then, the creation jade that came after, for our immortal Tao civilization to continue passing on and even reignite one day, we had to ensure three major factors. The first factor was the creation jade, the second factor was at least one saint, and the last factor was that the immortal Tao civilization's flame could not be severed. Otherwise, without the immortal Tao civilization's worship, the creation jade would not be able to repair itself. Under such circumstances, the prime clear saint, who knew that the situation was hopeless, found a piece of creation jade and found a place to create the source world, ensuring that the immortal Tao civilization's flame would not be extinguished. However, one piece of creation jade was clearly not enough. The prime clear saint vainly tried to find Tao ancestor Hunyuan and take away all of the creation jade. Unfortunately, by that time, we had already been completely defeated. Even the great Tao ancestor, hearing this, Tsing Hui's doubts were resolved. All along, he had thought that the teleportation formation from the divine wilderness great world to the source world was set up by Tao ancestor Hunyuan. But now, it seemed that it was the prime clear saint who had set it up. However, this was not strange. Among the many saints of the immortal Tao civilization, the prime clear saint was the one who had the deepest understanding of formations. The famous immortal extermination, sword formation, and 10,000 immortals formation were the best examples. The situation back then was really terrible. Unfortunately, I was in the long river of time and could not escape. I was powerless and could only think of ways to send a message to the prime clear saint. In the end, the prime clear saint might or might not have known. Anyway, he used a different method to leave behind the spark of the immortal Tao civilization and planted this spark on the Master of Chaos. He absorbed fuel from the Master of Chaos and turned it into the self-healing energy of the creation divine jade. A different method. Tsing Hui looked pensive. You mean the divine beast bloodline cultivation system? The green duckweed sword spirit nodded. Although the Master of Chaos draped a layer of skin over the divine beast bloodline system, it is undeniable that these 12 bloodlines are the continuation of our immortal Tao civilization. It is precisely because of the existence of these 12 bloodlines that the spark of the immortal Tao civilization can continue to burn and give the creation divine, Jade, the ability to self-heal. This is also why the creation divine Jade was able to fuse into one immediately after you obtain the creation divine Jade fragment. We have the creation divine Jade and the immortal Tao saint, and the spark of the immortal Tao civilization has never been extinguished. Although our immortal Tao civilization has experienced a great destruction and almost lost our inheritance, we can still welcome new life after the destruction. There was a faint smile on the green duckweed sword spirit's face. Now, what you need to do is borrow the power of the creation divine Jade to revive the fallen saints in the long river of time. Then, take advantage of these million years of peace and develop an even more magnificent immortal Tao civilization on the basis of the Master of Chaos universe. I believe that after obtaining the universe of this great chaos life form, our immortal Tao civilization will definitely have more resources and give birth to more experts. With more experts, the shackles will be unlocked and the saints of our immortal Tao civilization will have hope to take another step forward. Perhaps one day in the future, someone will truly be able to catch up to the great plate of eternity and step into the ultimate eternity that symbolizes eternity. Then what about me? After I revive the saints, how do I leave the long river of time? The fortune jade is the key to everything. What you need to do now is to summon the power of the fortune jade and project it into the river of time. It can resurrect the saints, and it can also take you away from the river of time. However, because your power has been exhausted the moment you manifested the river of time, you will experience a cycle of reincarnation. Moreover, because your information will be washed away by the river of time, this cycle of reincarnation will be incomparably thorough, and no information will be left behind. Ascend to the sainthood again? What if I can't ascend to the sainthood again? The green duckweed sword spirit was taken aback. How was that possible? You have the bearing of a saint, and one who is cultivated to the 5th level of the chaos realm. It's just one cycle of reincarnation and won't affect you much. At least, I remember the few saints who had reincarnated and cultivated anew. Their ascension to the sainthood was smooth and uneventful. Singhui thought back to everything that had happened along the way and began to ask himself, could he really ascend to the sainthood without any external help? In the countless copies of himself he had seen in the parallel universes, tens of thousands of copies of himself had collapsed in the saint realm, immortality realm, and even the mortal realm. If he collapsed halfway and was reincarnated again, would he still be himself at that time? Even if he ascended to the sainthood again, all traces and information that belonged to him would have been washed away by the long river of time. Would he still be himself at that time? Everything in the parallel universes was still vivid in his mind. In some parallel universes, he had even personally killed Jiang Ningji by shuaing and the others in order to attain Tao. For a moment, Singhui couldn't help but fall silent. I don't want to return in such a way where I lose everything. What should I do? If I don't want to reincarnate? The green duckweed sword spirit's expression was solemn. After a moment, he still looked towards the end of the eternal road. If he didn't want to reincarnate, there was only one way, and that was to attain eternity. Chapter 996. I want to take a look at the end of the eternal road and see the true appearance of eternity. Singhui was silent for a long time before he said slowly, the true appearance of eternity. The green duckweed sword spirit looked at Singhui and sighed in her heart. You might be disappointed if I tell you, but according to my understanding, whether you can successfully attain eternity and step onto the eternal road can be determined from the side the moment you step into the river of time. Singhui thought about the situation of the master of chaos, master of gods, master of time, and the others that the green duckweed sword spirit had mentioned. You mean ordinary people can't see the scenes in the river of time? Yes. The green duckweed sword spirit nodded. Other than yourself. No one can see your other timelines because the moment you attain eternity, you no longer have a past and a future. Countless timelines have been combined into one, and your true self is the only one. Other than you, who can see your own timeline, no other living being can see the mysteries of your timeline. In other words, even if I, a special living being in the river of time, wanted to transmit the other scenes in the river of time, I wouldn't be able to do so. Eternity determined by heaven. It's not determined by heaven. If you're really eternal, then you'll have attained eternity at a certain moment in the future. Then, there'll naturally be related signs. This sign, no matter what method you use to step into the river of time, will be understood and understood by you. The green duckweed sword spirit paused for a moment. Then, she smiled bitterly. Actually, this is a contradiction. There are two conditions to enter the river of time. One is that the river of time exists in this world, and the other is that the cultivator has the power to break through to the eternal realm. This is because stepping into the river of time requires you to burn everything and give up everything. If you don't have the power to break through to the eternal realm, then stepping into the river of time is akin to suicide. What about the chaos and creation beings? Most of them are only at the fourth or fifth tier of the chaos realm. They're still far from the eternal realm, right? Why would they choose to step into the river of time? Those chaos and creation beings are different from us. The green duckweed, sword spirit side. Every chaos and creation being is a legend. They've lived for hundreds of millions of years, perhaps even longer than our immortal Tao civilization. Under the erosion of time, they no longer have the will to forge ahead. Life and death no longer have any special meaning to them. Their sole purpose in life is to pursue the ultimate realm, eternity. Just as I've said, whether they've attained eternity or not, the moment they step into the river of time. They step into the river of time. Sing Hui's path to eternity was so cruel. The green duckweed sword spirit nodded. If they're able to break through to the eternal realm in their lifetime, then great perseverance, great wisdom, and great opportunities will follow when they step into the river of time. In short, there will be all sorts of opportunities and coincidences that will allow them to break through to the eternal realm and transform their state of mind, allowing them to step into the eternal realm in one fell swoop. Everything will come naturally, as though the moment they step into the river of time is the moment they step into the river of time. If they're not destined for the eternal realm, then their life's pursuit will be nothing more than an illusion. Under such circumstances, you can imagine the impact they'll suffer. Compared to a hopeless life, death is a form of release for them, which is why they'll step into the river of time without hesitation. The meaning of life, Tsing Hui understood. Compared to those chaotic beings and creation beings, the time he had spent as a chaotic being was far too short. It was so short that their understanding of the meaning of life was completely different. Most chaotic beings and creation beings, even if they break through to the eternal realm, will only wander around the edges of the chaotic universe and world that gave birth to them because they haven't seen through the meaning and true meaning of life. They can't give up their emotions as sentient beings, but when you've lived long enough, you'll realize how painful it is to continue living. The corrosion of time is the most merciless. Many powerful chaotic beings and creation beings can't even withstand the corrosion of time and choose to sleep. And it's an eternal sleep. For example, these chaotic beings and creation beings, even if they can't step into the eternal realm and only die, they'll still die at night. I believe that at the moment they die, they'll die with a smile. Tsing Hui sighed in his heart when he heard the green duckweed sword spirit's words. Everyone in the world strives for immortality, but if the poison of time corrodes all your worries as a sentient being, then what is the point of living? After a long period of silence, Qing Su said slowly, "The end of my timeline is when I was surrounded and killed by the Lord of Gods, the Lord of Chaos, the Lord of Time, as well as the various beings of chaos and creation. All of the timelines point to this scene in the end, and yet my timeline has never converged into one in the river of time. Is eternity destined from this moment? In fact, not a single one of the countless peerless geniuses of the immortal Tao civilization has been able to attain eternity." The sword spirit nodded. At least, none of the beings above golden immortal of the great firmament have been able to attain eternity. Golden immortal of the great firmament. This should have something to do with the Tao ancestor. The Tao ancestor used a strange technique to place the true spirit of a golden immortal of the great firmament in the river of time, allowing it to possess a trace of the mysteries of a chaotic being. This mysteries can allow one to borrow the power of the great firmament to breathe in and out chaos energy. Let's not talk about the exact use of this for now, but from then on, their shadows will be left in the river of time. Currently, there hasn't been a single being whose true spirit can't be placed in the river of time. If someone's true spirit can't be placed in the river of time, it means the sword spirit nodded and said at the same time, but the possibility is too low. You've already seen the images of the others in your timeline from the river of time. So you should naturally understand that in the vast thousand worlds and parallel universes, there are countless sixth-level chaotic beings similar to the Master of Chaos, the Master of Gods, and the Master of Time. They may have tried time and time again to attain eternity. In total, there are more than 100,000, a million, or even 10 million times, but without exception, they all ended in failure. Even the brilliant Master of Time, the Master of Gods, and the Master of Chaos ended up like this, let alone a tiny immortal Tao civilization like ours. Every eternity can be called a miracle of the world, a peerless darling who possesses the infinite fortune of the multiverse. Singhui raised his head and looked at the flowing light around him that was constantly flashing and flowing. Every streak of light was a timeline, and every timeline had countless living beings struggling and floating within it, and the fate of every single self in these timelines. They were all exactly the same. Whether or not he could attain eternity was already decided at this moment. Any subsequent efforts would be meaningless. Fate. If this was fate, how desperate would any living being who saw fate feel at this moment? Especially those who couldn't see fate, but whose fate had already been decided. How desperate would they feel? Ultimate eternity. This was the end of despair. Singhui lowered his head, completely disheartened. Cultivation? Becoming stronger? Becoming the master of his own life. What was the point of all of this? The moment fate was born, everything had already been decided. Those who could stand at the peak would definitely look down on all living beings from above. As for those who couldn't climb to the peak, no matter how hard they tried and how much they gave up, they could only roll and fall in front of the ultimate path. Fate was like a chasm of despair, destroying everyone's efforts and crushing them into dust and mud. Eternity, Singhui let out a long breath. At this moment, all the strength in his body seemed to have been sucked away. He turned back. Through the timelines, he looked back. If they didn't want to succumb to the hopeless and eternal fate, they would have to fight until their heads bled, just like the Master of Gods, the Master of Time, the Master of Chaos, and the many other creation and chaos life forms. They would have to fight for a single moment of light and die a heroic death. He still looked back without any results. He looked at the worries that he still couldn't completely let go of as a sentient being. He lowered his arrogant head that dared to look directly at the ultimate eternity. He turned his gaze to form a part of his life, to become one of the billions of living beings in the timelines. After a long time, Singhui's heart gradually calmed down. Billions of living beings. It was an adjective that he often used to describe billions of living beings. But in fact, in front of ultimate eternity, it was just one of the billions of living beings. Since he was one of the billions of living beings, he had to live according to the way the billions of living beings lived. Thinking of this, Singhui's gaze fell on the River of Time and every scene in the timelines in the River of Time. Many similar and different figures were constantly acting out the struggle of life and survival in the timelines. He looked at. It was as if he wanted to remember all these scenes in the bottom of his heart, bury them, and never forget them. Even though he understood, when he used the creation heavenly jade to pull living beings out of the River of Time and resurrect them. In order to get rid of the River of Time, all his memories, life information, and soul information would disappear under the scouring of the River of Time. However, he was still looking hard. Looking at this last scene, visualizing the creation's sacred jade, and borrowing the power of the creation's sacred jade as a key to project it into the River of Time, I can see all the living beings who have placed their true spirits in the River of Time and revive them. The green duckweed sword spirit nodded. Singhui's gaze fell on the green duckweed sword spirit again. What about you? The green duckweed sword spirit shook her head. I don't know. Maybe I will continue to stay in the River of Time and continue to stay until a certain eternity is born to help me escape this fate. Fate. Yes, fate. The green duckweed sword spirit repeated. Yes, fate? Singhui muttered and then laughed. The green duckweed sword spirit also smiled faintly. In the next moment, Singhui closed his eyes and focused on visualizing. The creation's sacred jade gradually appeared in the river of time. Chapter 997. Time flowed like water for 100,000 years. Though the Lord of Chaos himself had left, he left behind an immensely vast chaos verse. It was 1,000 times larger than the immortal Tao civilization at its peak, let alone the immortal Tao civilization that was now in tatters. The region where the Lord of Chaos and the immortal Tao civilization overlapped was in fact only a small part of his vast body. Aside from the peak experts in this region, there were countless sovereigns, rulers, and great masters in the Lord of Chaos universe. Some of the greatest masters were a cut above the likes of the Grand Creation, Holy Sovereign, and the Black and White Reverence. In terms of combat strength, they were at least on par with the Ten Vein level. Under such circumstances, even though the Lord of Chaos, the Lord of Time, the Lord of Gods, and the many creation and chaos beings that had once surrounded the immortal Tao civilization had left for 100,000 years, the immortal Tao civilization that only had vast ocean and plentiful treasures overseeing it could only survive between the cracks. Without the Lord of Chaos, the Lord of Gods, and the Lord of Time to restrain them, many peak masters emerged to wage war and slaughter everywhere. The Lord of Chaos Chaosverse and the immortal Tao civilization's Chaosverse were thrown into chaos, with countless battles of all sorts taking place in every corner of the domain. Until one day, a voice abruptly rang out in both the Lord of Chaos Chaosverse and the immortal Tao civilization's domain. Above the 9 layers of clouds, I comprehend the truth of the Tao on a praying mat. Beyond heaven and earth, I am the hierarch. Pangu gave birth to the Taiji, the yin and yang of the 4 divisions. The Tao is passed down to the 3 friends. The Chan and Jie sects are divided, and the Taoist sect leads the way. As the voice spread out, it seemed to resonate with the world. For a moment, streaks of golden light rose from a certain place in the immortal Tao civilization, illuminating 10 trillion light years. Under the influence of this voice, all living beings within range felt as if they were listening to holy music. All of them abruptly stopped fighting and looked in the direction of the voice with respect or shock. Compared to the living beings of the chaotic universe, the Lord of Time, and the Lord of Gods who didn't know what was going on, the many virtual immortals, true immortals, immortal lords, immortal emperors, and heavenly lords in the immortal Tao civilization were stunned when they heard the voice. Then their emotions surged. Some ancient immortals who had survived the great calamity couldn't help but cry tears of joy. They bowed in the direction of the voice and the golden light, calling them Tao Ancestor. The heavenly Lord of myriad treasures, the heavenly Lord of vast seas, the heavenly Lord of purple gold, and the other experts also rushed toward the source of the golden light and the sound at their fastest speed. At this moment, the immortal Tao civilization seemed to have been reborn. As Tao Ancestor Hongjun regained his sainthood, the structure of the world immediately changed. No matter how many almighty experts there were in the chaotic universe left behind by the Lord of Chaos, how could they possibly contend against a saint? Under Tao Ancestor Hongjuan's influence, the broken immortal Tao civilization directly infiltrated the Lord of Chaos universe, which only had its instinctive consciousness left. An unprecedented scene of a snake devouring an elephant played out. The Lord of Chaos universe, which only had its instinctive consciousness left, was defeated by Tao Ancestor Hongjuan's invasion. Not only did the immensely huge chaotic universe fall into the hands of the immortal Tao civilization, but Tao Ancestor Hongjun also used the laws cultivated by the 12 divine beasts as an entry point to infiltrate the Lord of Chaos universe, reversing the laws of the entire chaotic universe. Although only the Lord of Chaos universe was left behind for Tao Ancestor Hongjun to use, the Lord of Gods, the Lord of Time, and the other creation and chaos beings had all entered the River of Time. The River of Time was the foundation of the immortal Tao civilization, and the power it emitted transformed into laws, causing the immortal Tao civilization's laws to recover an extremely fast pace and become even stronger than before. Taking advantage of this advantage, Tao ancestor Hunyuan first used the laws of the 12 divine beasts to penetrate the Lord of Chaos universe. Then, he transformed the laws of the 12 divine beasts into pure cultivation laws of the immortal Tao civilization, causing the entire chaotic universe to shake violently. The revival of the immortal Tao and the acquisition of all the wealth left behind by the Lord of Chaos caused the entire immortal Tao civilization to experience explosive development. Countless cultivators of the immortal Tao civilization who had been stuck at the false immortal, true immortal, high immortal, immortal emperor, and even the heavenly monarch realm all broke through. False immortals broke through to true immortals. True immortals broke through to immortal monarchs. Immortal monarchs broke through to immortal emperors, and immortal emperors broke through to heavenly monarchs. The original heavenly monarchs grew even stronger and entered the ranks of the strongest. Killing ordinary great masters of combat arts was as easy as pie. Compared to the revival of the immortal Tao civilization, the peak experts born in the Lord of Chaos universe all suffered a drastic drop in cultivation due to the changes in laws. Even the strongest of the great masters of combat arts suffered a drastic drop in combat strength, becoming the weakest and most ordinary great masters of combat arts. Some of the weaker great masters of combat arts even fell from the throne of great masters of combat arts and became sovereigns. No, they were no longer sovereigns, but immortal emperors. The immortal Tao civilization's infiltration of the laws of the Lord of Chaos universe had fundamentally changed the very nature of the Lord of Chaos universe, causing the cultivation system of the Lord of Chaos to change. This was equivalent to one civilization's system invading and assimilating another civilization's system. In the end, only the strong survived. As time passed, the cultivation system of the immortal Tao civilization that rose once more would completely replace the cultivation system left behind by the Lord of Chaos, the Lord of Time, and the Lord of Gods. Those three great existences would then be squeezed into a corner just like before, with only the two heavenly lords, vast sea and plentiful treasures, barely surviving. In fact, the Lord of Time, Lord of Gods, and Lord of Chaos had considered that the immortal Tao civilization contained the mysteries of eternity, so they hadn't truly wiped out the immortal Tao civilization's legacy. They didn't want the mysteries of eternity to disappear with the destruction of the immortal Tao civilization. However, the immortal Tao civilization didn't care about the civilizations left behind by the three great masters. As the immortal Tao civilization's advantage grew, the cultivation system left behind by the Lord of Gods, Lord of Time, and Lord of Chaos would eventually be submerged in the river of time. It was possible that even a great master of combat arts, or even an immortal emperor, would cease to exist. The immortal Tao flourished. With the emergence of Tao ancestor Hunyuan, the immortal Tao civilization naturally welcomed unprecedented opportunities for development. In order to obtain greater power, countless cultivators who'd originally belonged to the Lord of Chaos abandoned their cultivation system that was destined to have little future prospects and joined the sects created by the immortal Tao civilization's top powerhouses. Lord of Violet Gold, Lord of Void, Lord of Dominating Dragon, Lord of Flashover, Lord of Cloud Orchid, the sects established by the various heavenly lords welcomed unprecedented opportunities for development. This was especially true for Lord of Vast Sea and Lord of Many Treasures, whose sects were hailed as the number 1 and number 2 sects in the world. In order to spread the immortal Tao civilization as quickly as possible and allow Tao ancestor Hunyuan to devour the chaos verse left behind by the Lord of Chaos more quickly and transform it into the foundation of the immortal Tao civilization, many immortal sects opened their doors wide and continuously recruited cultivators and living beings from the Lord of Chaos universe. True immortals, immortal lords, and immortal emperors opened their sects at every moment. attracting countless people to join them. Every few thousand years, more and more powerful organizations would rise to prominence, taking the place of the chaos versus native forces and expanding the influence of the immortal Tao civilization. The immortal Tao civilization's development was in full swing, ushering in an unprecedented golden age. With the opening of many sects, the Eastern Sun Sword sect, which had a heavenly lord overseeing it, naturally attracted countless people. The heavenly lords of the Eastern Sun Sword sect were still inexperienced compared to those who'd broken through to become heavenly lords of old. The sect's foundation was also far from comparable to those who'd broken through to become heavenly lords. However, a heavenly lord was still a heavenly lord. Countless geniuses were attracted every time the sect opened its doors and left behind many fascinating legends in the sect competition. Today, however, it was time for the Eastern Sun Sword sect to open its doors again. At this moment, a young man was walking along the mountain path of the Eastern Sun Sword sect with a sword in hand, accompanied by a servant. He traveled against the wind and arrived at the sect square. This young man was born in the Liu family, a great immortal cultivation clan. His ancestor had once been a great medium. However, due to the decline of the cultivation system of the Master of Chaos, that great medium had no choice but to change his path and cultivate the immortal Tao. Relying on the foundation that he had accumulated in the past, he now had the cultivation of an immortal emperor and could be considered a tyrant. However, despite his immortal emperor cultivation, the cultivation world had a very important disadvantage compared to the cultivation system of other worlds: sectarian bias. When the immortal Tao civilization had promoted the immortal Tao cultivation system, all kinds of cultivation methods have been spread everywhere. However, now that the immortal Tao civilization had become the mainstream of the world, the top cultivation methods were gradually withdrawn by the heavenly lords and kept as secrets. In addition, the immortal lords, immortal emperors, and heavenly lords not only had cultivation, but also divine abilities and dharma treasures. These secret methods were all in the hands of the top immortal Tao factions. Without powerful divine abilities and top-notch dharma treasures, even an immortal emperor might be killed by a true immortal lord with a connate spiritual treasure. Under such circumstances, although the Liu family had an immortal emperor, there were also many immortal lords. In order to obtain top-notch divine abilities and connate spiritual treasures, they still allowed their disciples to join the major cultivation sections. The young man in front of him was the most outstanding genius of the Liu family's younger generation. He was extremely talented and had cultivated for less than 100 years, but he had already become an immortal lord. He was extremely ambitious and had given himself the name Suppress, which meant that he could suppress all the geniuses in the world. With such talent, he naturally didn't have to worry about not being able to join any of the heavenly lords. Instead, he had to choose which sect to join. This time, he had been away for 100 years and visited 4 of the top sects with heavenly lords. He had secretly observed them, but none of them were worthy of his attention. The Eastern Sun Sword sect before him was the 5th. Young master, I've already learned about the Eastern Sun Sword sect in detail. Although they have a heavenly lord, she just became a heavenly lord 10,000 years ago. It said that she was only an immortal lord 100,000 years ago. Compared to the 4 great sects and 4 great heavenly lords we went to before, they're inferior. I don't think we should waste too much time in this sect. The old man who looked like a servant beside the young man said in a low voice. Although he was dressed as a servant, he was a true immortal lord. His cultivation was not inferior to many of the outer sect elders of the Eastern Sun Sword sect. Since we're here, we should take a look. The heavenly lord of the Eastern Sun Sword sect was able to break through 2 levels in 100,000 years. Maybe there's something special about her. The young man said seriously. Well then. Although the Lord of Heaven of the Eastern Sun Sword sect can't compare to those veteran experts, the sect has a tradition. Every time the sect opens its doors, the sect master who is cultivated to the Lord of Heaven will personally appear and pass down a set of swordsmanship to the world. Although this set of swordsmanship may not be very brilliant, It's probably not too bad since it's taught by a Lord of Heaven. This is also the reason why so many people come to the Eastern Sun Sword sect every time the sect opens its doors. It's one thing to be a disciple, but the main thing is to learn a move or two from the Lord of Heaven. A heavenly lord performing a sword technique. The young man couldn't help but be curious. A heavenly lord was a figure who stood at the peak of the cultivation world. Now, he was willing to show up in front of the world and teach them a sword technique. This was very rare. Dong! 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 As the sound spread throughout the world, the disciple selection of the Eastern Sun Sword sect finally began. However, the young man didn't sign up. Instead, he watched from below the stage. With his current level of cultivation, it would be bullying if he fought with those disciples who were at most at the void immortal realm in the arenas that had been cultivated for less than 300 years. Even if he fought with someone who had cultivated for more than 1,000 years, no one would be able to defeat him. If it weren't for the fact that he couldn't get a profound cultivation art, he wouldn't even want to join the sect. With his talent, he would definitely be able to enter the heavenly lord realm in 1,000 years or even 10,000 years. Why would he want to be a disciple of someone else? The disciples of the Eastern Sun Sword sect were fighting in an orderly manner. After 10 days, 300 disciples finally stood out and were qualified to enter the Eastern Sun Sword sect. As the disciple selection came to an end, many cultivators who knew the rules of the Eastern Sun Sword sect immediately became excited. The Heavenly Lord performing a sword technique would take place after the disciple selection. He's coming, he's coming. Along with a burst of excited shouts, the crowd immediately became excited. In the forbidden area of the back mountain of the Eastern Sun Sword sect, a bright light suddenly shone, and a beautiful figure walked out of the light. Heavenly Lord Jiang is here. Greetings, Heavenly Lord Jiang. Thank you, Heavenly Lord Jiang, for performing a sword technique for us. All kinds of shouts came from the crowd, and many people even bowed respectfully to the beautiful figure in the void. However, the figure didn't answer. She just rode the wind and started to perform a sword technique. A technique. It looked like a mortal technique, but contained the essence of the sword Tao and was full of unparalleled mysteries. For a moment, everyone fell silent. Among these people, including the young man from the Liu family, he looked at Heavenly Lord Jiang performing a sword technique in front of him, and his mind went blank. At this moment, there was a gentle breeze, and there was a blue sky and white clouds. Countless magnificent buildings rose from the ground in the Eastern Sun Sword sect, and there were also green trees everywhere. But in front of him, at this moment, only the figure performing a sword technique in the void was left, her unadorned face, her exquisite dancing figure, and her elegant and ethereal temperament. This scene was suddenly imprinted in his mind. It seemed like a long time, but also seemed like only a moment. At this moment, time was like an ink brush that drew an ink painting, rolled up by someone, and cast into eternity. There's no need to ruin everyone's reading experience for the goal of 1,000 chapters. Let's stop here for this book. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.